It's episode 2 of the 3-way comparison tests. This time, it's time for the Sony XS 163 ES. Let's take a look at them. Incredibly, this chart has stayed on the board since the last time I wrote it about the Caraudio ones. If you haven't seen that episode, go and watch it and it'll explain the chart to you. It's my chart, my way of figuring out which one's the best one, basically. Time for the Sony to play. Got my trusty pen. Everything is in my head. I haven't written anything down. So this van gets used for long trips, say mountain biking. It gets used for driving to and from home. It gets used for tip runs. Everything van based happens in this van. So its stereo is in constant use. So you get a good representation when you've changed the speakers. You've got a lot of time in there, you know. It's been through a bit of a rough patch, the old van, bless it. We went to the Forest of Dean, and Richard, my mate, he just had a terrible time. He had some sort of sickness bug the whole time, so the van got covered in that. Then he came off his bike and cut himself to bits, and he got that all over the door build, so they're going to need redoing. But one thing good to come of all that is we were in the van for hours, you know, and we have probably done about 50 hours in the van, so a good, you know, little running in period and a good representation from the 3-way set, so we've got a good understanding of them. Right, let's go into it. The Sony XS 163 ES, a 3-way set with like a 2¼ inch mid-range with a double flange fitting, really slimline tweeter, really lightweight build and quite good for installation. So build wise, they're going to get an 8 from me. That lightweight, it is a show of advancement in technology, but it is like speakers like a little bit of heft to them. Energy loss is high in lighter builds, basically. You know, if we can have a rock solid speaker, we're going to have minimal energy loss from that speaker. So we're straight in with an 8. Install. This one conflicts me because they are shallow and easy to work with. They're a really simple fit, but that double flanged mid-range really annoys me because in a fabricated install you're gonna have to cut them off, you know, and then find a way of clamping them off of old school speakers, like using screws to trap down the outer edge and stuff like that, which is a perfectly fine way of mounting a speaker. Look at most most studio-based pro audio products from like the 60s, 70s and 80s. A lot of them will have clamps that mount the speaker, and then the clamp is screwed into the baffle. So the actual speaker itself is flangeless, I suppose, or has a flange but without a mounting bolt PCD. So you'd have to do that with these in a custom install, which means anything you make, you can't take advantage of the small form factor of the mid-range because that has to be outboard of the mid-range. So they're going to get an 8 from me for install. The reason it scored an 8 and I didn't mark it right down because of that mid-range, sorry, is because they are shallow. Everything is thought out quite well, so the bolt patterns are all nice. The actual mounting of them into a conventional door, so, you know, behind the door card, you'll get them in there quite easily because they are relatively shallow. They are light, so they are easy to work with. They all come with grills as well, which is nice, minus the mid-range. But yeah, so there's a lot of value there. So yeah, that's what brought it back up in terms of installation. Look, personal. As I said last time, it's a very personal thing. These speakers actually look quite nice. When you take into consideration their value and the market that they're sort of aimed at, they look quite nice. I like that orange ring around the tweeter. The phase plugs between the mid-bass and the mid-range, they all match. Everything looks quite nice. So yeah, there's a 9 there for me. Specs, 9 again, so it specs quite well, you know. The mid bass is spec quite well. It'll play quite low, and it does play quite low. It's quite energetic and vibrant mid bass to listen to. The reason it's not a 10 again is because of the mid range. It's just not capable in the way that I wanted it to be capable. Sound 7. Now it seems drastic because everything else on there is an 8, a 9 or a 10. Bearing in mind they've had a tough act to follow. Okay, they followed an Aesotech set, a Dynaudio Aesotech set. I can't get this mid-range at high volume to not start quacking at me, all right? It rips a bit when it's loud. The tweeter's nice and smooth, you can get that to work well. The mid bass, like I say, is really vibrant and energetic. It works quite well with a little bit of tuning. I had to do more adaptations to this than I had considered, and that's probably something I'm going to have to bring into this. They're probably going to need a couple of hours worth of tuning each time each set gets changed. You can't expect a speaker with completely different parameters to respond in the same way from the same tuning, and I knew that going in, but I thought I could get away with minimal chips at the tuning between the speaker set to try and keep a realistic single tune, or not necessarily a single tune, but a realistic test bed. But they're all going to need a different variation of tuning, really. So yeah, I cannot rein the mid-range in without bringing its output down to a point where it's no longer relative with the tweeter and the mid-bass. There's a suck out there. So yeah, on volume, the mid-range starts to quack a bit. The rest of them are fine. I actually have considered multiple times while driving it to remove the mid-range from the build and go two-way and see how those two blend together, because they are the standout products in this three-way set. 399 value is going to get 10. This is basing things on the way I like them to sound. I will have a particular sort of highly strung taste. I'm used to listening to extremely expensive speakers. I'm used to listening to entry-level speakers. You know, I have a vast array of experience in terms of listening to component sets. So that's where I think that its sound being a 7 on our chart is relative to the value of the product. So I actually think that the fact that you get everything in the box, you get all the grills in the box, all the installation parts are in the box, it's a really well thought out kit, and then the fact that it sounds good, 7 isn't bad, you know. I think the value's great. Himif, how it makes you feel. Didn't make me feel very good because of the mid-range. Gets a 7 there. I've told you about this one. How it makes you feel is probably the most important thing for me in terms of a speaker kit and a car. It doesn't matter to me if it cost 3 grand. It doesn't matter to me if it costs 300 quid. If it makes me feel mustard, it's staying in there. All right. So it scores a 7 on here because I can't romp on it. All right. I can't wind it up without thinking, whoa. And I'm reaching for dB neg, you know, I'm reaching to turn the volume down, and I don't want to be doing that. So give me a minute while I work the total out. Be right back. 58. Total of 58. Hopefully you can see the board. Last time I worked at the whiteboard for my, you know, how to fix simple things in caraudio, you couldn't see it because the camera was changing its white balance for probably the tone of my skin rather than the actual whiteness of the board. But yeah, 58. Looks low, it's out 70, remember? So it's still up there. It's a 400 quid speaker. Now, what I'm considering is the next batch of speakers we try at this level, it might actually affect this one's scores, all right? If we start reviewing things like the Miele Pro set or a Morel set of the same value or something like that, and they all have these similar characteristics, then these numbers are probably going to go up a little bit, right? If we review one that's, say, 400 quid and it's just dreadful, then it will make this one seem, you know, much better value. So this isn't a direct comparison really between the Dynaudio and the Sony. I think we all knew who was going to win that fight. It's kind of heavily weighted on the Dynaudio side. It's a very, very specialist set of speakers. and in my opinion about 50% of the price that it should be. So it was never going to win that fight. But these two, unfortunately, the Sony had to follow the Dynaudio into this comparison. But this table will grow as we get, you know, more and more speakers through and more time to change these three ways over. I actually think, considering the fact it costs $399, that 58 isn't actually a bad figure out of 70. It's quite a nice, energetic, peppy thing to listen to. I thought what we were gonna get, because we've got the 5650, the Sony head unit, and the XM8, the new Sony 8-channel amplifier, which I think has been released now. I thought we were gonna get a little bit of Sony magic. In hi-fi, we call it unity between different pieces of kit. So you can have a brand of, I don't know, let's say a Hagel CD player, Dynaudio speakers, and a Luxman amp. And those three together might have all of the little, all of the sauce that it takes to create this fantastic recipe for the end sound. A lot of the time when you have a single brand product, they're just made to work with each other. And yeah, we didn't really get that. The Dynes were just way better in this scenario. So yeah, what ones do we do next? I mean, they're still in the van. They sound, like I say, they sound just fine. So happily daily driving with them. But the next time they get changed will be with whatever we're going to replace it with. And it may well be the Miele Pro, which I use in my own car. I just don't use it from this perspective. I'm not back-to-backing it with other drivers. Anyway, I'm rambling now. These could end up being boring enough as it is. I'm going to shoot, but that's my take on the Sony XS163 ES. You've already had my take on the ESATEC 342. Go and have a look at that. It's a studio Incar. You take it easy.